Hello, dear YouTube viewers. Finally, I pronounced the word correctly. Welcome to Real Turkey channel. This is your host Atilla Yeşilada, and here is good friend and lucky camel Ebu Mezbele. He shall be accompanying us in our programs from now on. This is not a promotion of Camel cigarettes. I do not smoke Camel. I smoke Parliament. But Ebu Mezbele survived the Eid al-Ahra. He was not slaughtered, so I have granted him a safe refuge in my home. Okay, today's topic is that a very daunting schedule awaits Turkey in the coming weeks. And I would like to say a few words about the emerging markets environment and how it affects Turkey, as well as political and economic problems, but mostly political problems, because the previous video, which you will see to your right, is about Turkey's economic agenda and the latest data, post-aid, post-holiday data, which was horrendous. Turkish economy is heading for a recession again. First, the emerging markets environment and how it impacts Turkey. Hong Kong protests continued Sunday, which is the day I am shooting this video, Sunday 19th of August, I believe, and the planet is Earth, presumably. Hong Kong is very important to China as well as to Asian economies, and Hong Kong will probably end the year in a recession, as well as there's a threat of Chinese military intervention, which could have repercussions on China-United States relations, as well as China's relations with other countries such as the EU, and the psychological shock could further undermine emerging markets' confidence. The crises in Argentina related to Fernandez and Kirchner beating Macri in the first round of elections seems to have abated on Friday, but it's too early to call it over. I live in Turkey. I know how elections work. They are in October. Until October, market participants will be watching polls, whether Macri is catching up on Fernandez. Kirchner, 2, what will be Fernandez's policies? Will he stay with IMF? Will he stick to IMF recipes? Does he have a novel plan to save the economy? If he doesn't, then the Argentina crisis will of course be repeated. According to Reuters, the Argentina crisis is not contagious. It doesn't affect other countries, but nevertheless, last week $3.4 billion left emerging markets funds. Some of it is, in my view, because of the psychological impact of Argentina or Hong Kong. Some of it because people couldn't sell in Argentina and dumped perhaps Turkish stocks and bonds. I wouldn't know because we didn't have any data. Nevertheless, the emerging markets environment is deteriorating rapidly, and to go by the conventional wisdom, even though I don't necessarily agree with it, it will not improve unless Fed in September announces that it is engaging in a series of rate cuts. If it doesn't do so, if it limits itself to another 25 basis point rate cut and says this is enough, I think the emerging markets environment will deteriorate further, and there will be negative repercussions for Turkey in terms of financial flows, perhaps even bank credit. This week there is the Jackson Hole meeting where major central bankers and renowned economists are getting together to discuss issues which I never understood in the graduate school. But nevertheless, we could expect some messages from Fed governors about their intentions vis-a-vis monetary policy, and these will be closely watched. Any signals from Fed hawks that no rate cuts are warranted, or that there will be only a very limited amount of rate cuts, is very negative for EM and of course for Turkey. Moving on to Turkey's political agenda, it's turbulent. There is good news and bad news. The good news is relations with the United States after a long period of conflict could be on demand. The Turkish and American militaries are cooperating fairly well to establish a safe zone to the east of Euphrates on the Syrian side of the Syrian border, which would be purged of PKK terrorists. There are still disagreements on the depth of the zone, whether the current occupants of the zone, YPG, PYD, a Kurdish entity affiliated with PKK, would completely abandon that zone. But it is my understanding that YPG, PYD does not want war, cherishes its relationship with the United States, and will be flexible in terms of signing on to this safe zone. So I do expect a deal within a few weeks. Probably not a perfect deal for Turkey or for the Kurds, but one that would avert the possibility of a military campaign by Turkish military in Syria, which would have been a disaster from the market perspective, of course, and of course a human disaster. Unfortunately, this is not the only risk coming from Syria. We also have the Idlib issue. Idlib is at the other end of Syria, northwest corner. It's the only rebel province left in the northwest, and it's currently occupied mostly by an Al-Qaeda affiliated rebel organization called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Abu Mezbele. I hope I'm not insulting your beautiful Arabic language. He is giving me the finger or the or the claw, I believe, whatever it's called. But anyhow, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is really dangerous, and I would admit that it is harassing Christian and Alawite villages on the Assad side and the two highways that connect Assad territories. But nevertheless, the retaliatory air bombardment is completely inhuman, and it is pushing hundreds of thousands of refugees towards Turkish border, according to the recent UN report. There may be roughly 500,000 poor, huddled refugees waiting in squalid refugee camps for admittance to Turkey, which Turkey really can't admit because AKP voters are dead set against admitting more Syrian refugees who compete for social services. So Turkey needs to defend Idlib, and it does so by transferring Free Syrian Army brigades, which were defending neighboring provinces of Afrin and Al-Bab, to Idlib. Unfortunately, on the ground, the pro-Turkey rebels have the sufficient wherewithal to stop Assad's army, but they're helpless against air bombardments. So Turkey needs to solve this issue with Russia, and if it doesn't, there might be an eventuality where Turkish military will have to get involved and face Assad soldiers, which would again be an extremely negative event for Turkish economy and markets, as well as for our budding relationship with Russia. So, we are in the process of solving one problem in Syria, but there might be another one coming. As 400s have not completely disappeared from the scene, it's now clear that Mr. Trump really likes our President Erdogan, and he's dead set against imposing any Katsa sanctions on Turkey. But Congress is extremely enraged about Turkish behavior for reasons too complicated to discuss. And there is talk in the halls of Congress to pass new legislation to bypass Trump and to sanction Turkey unilaterally. I can't tell you how realistic this is because the Congress, as I understand, is currently in recess. But in September, we should be monitoring whether such legislation is making headway and whether it has the 2/3 majority to sustain a veto from Trump. As you can tell, English is my third, maybe even the fifth language. Abu Mezbele speaks better. Sorry. So these are the political risks at home to erstwhile AKP heavyweights. Mr. Ali Babacan and former PM Professor Davutoglu are setting up their own parties. In fact, Professor Davutoglu rented a building to serve as his party headquarters. According, I'm sorry, too much camel. According to a recent survey, anonymous survey, but widely quoted in Turkish press, if Turkey were to hold general elections tomorrow, Babacan would garner 8% of the national vote, Davutoglu would get 3%, which sounds small, but combined 11%, most of it would come from AKP votes. In the same poll, AKP receives 39%. So if they lose roughly 8-9% of it, they may lose their majority in the Grand Assembly, which they currently control with their ally MHP. And it is my belief, partly supported by survey data I have seen, that unless Turkey is restored to a faster growth path, say 4%, 5% a year, Mr. Ali Babacan and Davutoglu will automatically receive recruits from AKP because, economic suffering is very deep. How Mr. Erdogan deals with this problem, whether he comes up with a new economic strategy, new economic plan, something that's meaningful, that's orthodox to accelerate the economy, is of prime importance. So far, I have seen no signs of it. There has been no cabinet change, no announcement of structural measures or new economic programs above and beyond confiscating central bank assets to use to cover the budget deficits. So there is a AKP Congress or convention coming up where he might announce new measures, but if he doesn't, the only hope for Turkish economy, as far as he's concerned, is the central bank's April MPC Monetary Policy Committee meeting, where he will probably inspire central bank to cut rates further. Now, rate cuts, even though I don't agree with them, would have been acceptable or at least harmless if we were in a risk-on environment, if the EM was receiving hot money. But assuming the turmoil from Hong Kong and Argentina would continue, or recession fears would further undermine the strength of confidence in EM funds, further rate cuts would undermine Turkish lira and bond markets and may lead to an exodus of financial capital from Turkey. Furthermore, Turkish people believe inflation is higher than announced by Turkstat. It may also accelerate dollarization. Therefore, central banks' monetary policy meeting ought to be watched very carefully. A small rate cut won't change anything, but a hefty rate cut, another 200, 300 basis points, would make a significant difference to the currency markets and to the bond markets. I would expect a sell-off. In other words, there are few upsides, such as the safe zone and perhaps new economic announcements, but overall, Turkey's risks continue, and these risks will accelerate unless Fed comes up with a very drastic QE type of program that will bail out most of the emerging markets. This was Atilla Yeşilada, broadcasting for Real Turkey channel. Please share this video for Turkey enthusiasts if you have any in your state, country, or county, and do send us your comments so we can improve on our performance. Thank you very much and have a good weekend.